Coming up, we're doing a Nuss Farms season recap, digging into the challenges and the opportunities from a farmer on the ground. That's Tim, not me. The Modern Acre podcast is presented by Corteva R&D, the research and development engine of Corteva Agriscience. Corteva is a global pure-play agriculture company that combines industry-leading innovation and high-touch customer engagement to deliver solutions for the world's most pressing agriculture challenges. Through world-class research, Corteva R&D is pioneering solutions to shape the future of agriculture. Their robust pipeline is laser-focused on delivering differentiated products and lasting value to help farmers grow and protect their productivity now and in the future. All right, Tim, I'm excited for this episode. You know, this has been a fun past month or so. We decided, hey, let's change things up with the pod. We've been doing it for almost 8 years. Let's put a brief hiatus on doing traditional guest interviews and formats. And by golly, Tim, it has been nice. It's been nice to not have the regular interview or two interviews on the calendar each week. It's been a nice reset for me personally.
Yeah, it's been nice to kind of take Thanksgiving to the new year and just kind of, not be able to navigate people's schedules during the holidays, and we can just jump on and riff about things that we want to talk about that sometimes we don't have the opportunity to when we're just doing the straight interview format.
We love having guests on that are smarter than us and can talk to us about what they're building. But yeah, it's been nice to kind of have a looser schedule and stuff as we wrap up the year. We will be back with the regular scheduled programming that you guys have come to know and love about the Modern Acre, but this has been a nice reset for us to finish off the year. And most exciting, we're going to wrap the year, so make sure you're subscribed. You're tuning in to our annual Acre Awards. Tim, this will be year 3 of the annual Acre Awards. I am super excited. We do this every year now for the past 3 years around the Christmas, New Year's holiday to do a different fun episode. It's a really like a year in review recap award show. So be on the lookout for that in the next 2 weeks.
Ty, also another 3-year anniversary. Came back to the farm full time 3 years ago. It's crazy how quick that's been.
I know it is wild. You are a seasoned farmer now. You went from idealistic and excited to now being a Grinch and a grump about farming. So it's been crazy to see. It's crazy to watch.
Just such an operator.
We talked on our last episode about Tim, maybe starting the year in farmer mode and ending the year in Grinch mode.
I think a lot of farmers have ended the year in Grinch mode this year. It's been quite a challenging season.
Yeah, so we're going to dig into that. I think, Tim, I'd love to just recap the season with you a little bit, and not just like, hey, this is what happened another year, but like really focus on what are the opportunities? Like what gets us excited, and where do we think that investors, ag tech founders can like fit some of these pieces that, make agriculture farming so challenging for growers? Like how can we help address some of these things? I think there are so much opportunities in ag tech generally to improve what growers do and how they farm and how they make money. And so I think I'd love to dig into some of those opportunities. But Tim, why don't you give us a little bit of a season in review how the year went?
Yeah, overall, a pretty interesting season. I think there's a lot of macro factors that we'll get into, farm economy and just some kind of sluggish commodity movement, suppressed demand, that kind of stuff. But overall, on the production growing side, had a really favorable year. We had just ideal weather conditions pretty much the entire growing season, which was quite the opposite of last year in 2024 when we just had excessive heat that damaged and impacted a lot of the crops. So from kind of an agronomic production standpoint, had a really good year, like on all the crops that we grow. I think we hit or exceeded budget, which was obviously a good thing when we put a number on the budget for we want to hit X amount of yield on tomatoes, and to hit that on pretty much every case this year, that was a big win for us, like showing that kind of the fertility and the management plans are working. Timing wise, we were pretty much on time with everything this year, where we were able to get in the ground by mid-April with our earliest plantings and transplantings, and pretty long season for us this year. We actually went a couple weeks later than last year, wrapped up our pepper harvest in early November, which is quite a long season to be running kind of from mid-April until November, and then you have the shoulders of a couple months leading up to and after the crops, where it's become pretty much a continuous year-round operation. Overall, on the growing side, it was pretty smooth. I heard one farmer like refer to this year as like farming with training wheels, as opposed to last year, where like there's you can get through a year like this and make a few mistakes and still put up a good crop, versus years where weather gives you more curveballs.
It is just wild. It seems like we talked about this a few times this year, Tim. It's like for farming, so many things have to go right for you to have a good year. Just a good year, not even a great year, but so many things have to go right for you to have a good year, and like just one or two things need to go wrong for it to be like not great, and like or close to break even, right? And that's just like the reality. There's so many externalities in agriculture: weather, market pricing, labor, timing, soil, right? There's like all these externalities that you only have so much control over. And I think that's why a lot of farmers end the year in Grinch mode, because I think it's exhausting to manage all these externalities.
Totally. Yeah. It's like we've talked about that a while. There's thousands of different variables, and like one thing that's out of your control goes wrong and that tanks the entire year. It's not like you're 1% off. Like if one thing goes bad, it goes really, really wrong. So I think that's where just constant farmers in general like have a lot of stress and pressure, like based on their individual operations and some of the challenges there. And so sometimes when you get the knock or the email at harvest, some farmers are just exhausted and need a couple of weeks to decompress and start thinking about next year.
So for those ad tech companies that are selling farmers in the off season, and you get a not necessarily a positive response, there's a lot driving that. I think is what you're trying to say, Tim.
Follow up in January might get a different response.
The January follow up. Tim, are you on January? This is a January problem mode now.
Yeah, it's December 17th as we're recording this. This is like, unless it's like a house is on fire, it's like, let's circle up after the new year. I'm in that mode.
You're in punting mode.
I'm in punt mode.
Punt mode. That's not a bad idea. Maybe we should get that domain, puntmode.com.
Lock it up. Yeah.
Lock it up.
Just punt it.
All right, Tim, let's break down some of these. So, I mean, like, let's talk, weather went well. And I think weather is just a really interesting factor. Tim, I feel like we've seen a few companies in particular like try to focus on weather. Maybe we could unpack some of those ideas and like what your thoughts are on them, because I think we had a great year this year, but weather is always this risk. Like, how do you manage? How do you mitigate it? And what would you as a farmer be willing to pay for kind of mitigating that risk, right? I think of like Climate Corporation fundamentally originally started with weather risk, right? Like crop insurance to address weather risk. So I'm curious your thoughts on that area.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like it's, situational. It doesn't happen every year. So it's like for business models that are like, we just want this recurring steady cash flow. I think that's a big challenge with these businesses that are focused around products that are addressing heat stress, whether it's through genetics or applications during the season. But when you need it, you need it. Like if there was a product that helped mitigate heat stress and you have a heat event coming on, like you would spend the money to preserve the crop. Like that's an easy ROI calculation. The challenge for these companies is like, it's not going to happen every year, where you could get a year like this where like no major heat events hit and you just don't have sales this year. So it's kind of a lumpy business model to tether yourself to. And like when you're raising investors, like I'm sure that's a big red flag, is like the weather related risk. No investor likes that uncertainty that farmers have to deal with. We've had a couple conversations on farm this year with folks that are looking to mitigate heat stress through a number of different applications. So like it's definitely of interest to us, and like being kind of upfront with those companies of like what I just stated. It's like this might not be an every year need for us, but it's a need that might pop up every few years. And when we need it, we're going to need it. So I think the companies are working through kind of the various business models associated with that. But I think there's big opportunities there, both on like heat stress control, but also like mitigation on cooling, where you get excessive cooling. There's some technologies coming out that are mitigating that as well to like prevent freeze and chill damage.
What's the name of the one rain company, the Clouds?
Rainmaker.
Yeah, Tim, we saw that company Rainmaker. I think is like super interesting in this space. Like, I feel like there's some crazy ideas out there about how to address this. So Rainmaker,
it's like cloud seeding, where they can go and basically like seed rain clouds, and like they think working on a project now in Salt Lake City where they're trying to like refill the Great Salt Lake, which is like some pretty like crazy audacious projects they're working on. Like they've, I think, talking in the fringes about agriculture, but I think they're going after more like bigger scale, like more industrial problems. Maybe it's like a regulatory thing that they're kind of focusing in certain areas.
Yeah, I'd love to get them on the podcast. That's, I think, super interesting. It looks like they use like drones to seed these clouds, which is just, yeah, crazy stuff.
What could go wrong?
Well, yeah, exactly. All right, weather. Let's talk crop pricing, Tim. Like, I think that's just been a challenge. Like, what's your perspective? I feel like you've now 3 years in, you've kind of seen the ups and the downs over the past few years. Like, yeah, give us your perspective on market pricing and how you mitigate that risk, or how you think about just managing that risk.
Yeah, it's definitely like specific to crop, or like each crop has a different dynamic in terms of like where the production is coming from, what the seasonality is, and what pricing is doing as a result. So we've seen, over the past couple of years, some pricing trend downward. We've seen some stay stable. So obviously when pricing is staying stable, that's a positive. We've seen a few instances where pricing has gone up slightly. So it's been kind of a mixture type based on the individual crop type. A lot of what we do is on a contract basis, which is definitely helpful, where we can lock in a contract and we're just trying to optimize for yield and hit that contract, versus other deals that are more fresh market, spot market type sales, and that we're just kind of speculating and assuming kind of here's an average return that we're going to get in whenever the harvest period is. And so that exposes us to more risk based on having some uncertainty of, we don't know how many acres have been planted in California or Western US or other parts of the state come times of harvest, and how that's going to impact the price at retail.
Yeah, let's dig into this like oversupply concern or issue. I mean, we had a very specific, I think this impacted all of our crops, but it just pretty wild to me how sensitive some of these markets are, where you have like one or a handful of other growers decide to grow a specific crop that haven't done it historically, and it can totally like plunge a market. So like, talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, I think our probably most extreme example was in watermelons.
Yeah, definitely on the watermelons, like faced a really challenging market. Like the entire deal, we started harvest around the 4th of July and harvest for a couple months. And it was just kind of at the start, there's usually like, a 4th of July pull where people are buying watermelons for the holiday. And there was really like no pull this year. So I think this is like two-part, where like consumer demand was I think down this year. I'm not sure if it was the economy is sluggish in general, or people just weren't buying watermelons if retailers are promoting other items, but just movement was slow in general. And also, to your point, there's a lot of net new acres that went in the ground in California and Arizona, other markets that competed with kind of local supply and kind of more legacy suppliers that have had a consistent, stable supply base during the year. So there was like a lot of examples of this where we'd seen bins in Costco and in Bakersfield that just had didn't even have like a farm name. It was just like a generic brown box with like a Hotmail email address of suppliers that have getting their foot in the door with really large retailers and kind of changing the dynamics of like who the historical suppliers have been and kind of what DCs are served. There was like a lot of production that came out of Arizona that historically hadn't, that kind of flooded the Southern California market and supplied a lot of the distribution centers down there, which is kind of like has this ripple effect through kind of the different channels and where you can place products. So that was kind of our most pronounced challenge this year, was just navigating that down market. And like on the production side, we hit our yield targets. Like we were, we grew the crop, produced the crop, but the challenge was just kind of competing for that market share and increased supply. And like, I think about oversupply in two different ways. It's like there's increased production, like, locally in your area. There's also, oversupply could be like other parts of the state that are a little bit farther away, or other states that are close to you, and also increased competition from imports that's kind of eroding and eating into that as well. I think saw Rivermade put out a note. They're a cherry and pear supplier in California, and they put out a note that California pears are just really threatened right now by the Argentinian pear industry, where the markets are getting flooded with Argentinian pears that are cheaper than producing a pear in California. And like this always like gets me a little upset, Ty, of like, like we saw this on California asparagus. Like our family went through that firsthand of just like, you see a market get flooded with this imported product, and all of a sudden there's no longer an industry there. Like there was, videos of pear orchards getting ripped out, and like, it's just, terrible to see that. Like, I think there's people that are buying pears, but the cost has been driven down to such a point where you can't produce them locally, which is always devastating.
Yeah, this to me seems like the most fundamental issue, and like one of the most fundamental issues in agriculture right now is like solving or addressing this. And I think it is a crisis, right? Of the fact that we grow the best crops here in our country and in our local states and regions, and yet we're getting flooded by imports. And I'm a free market guy generally, but I think like this is just an area that I feel like there's enough inefficiencies in the supply chain where there's opportunities to solve this. That makes economic sense. And I'm not the one solving it, but I hope someone does. Like I just think this is such an issue. And then Tim, like the other side of this is that we haven't discussed so far is just food waste. Like I think it's a travesty, right? That so many how many? I mean, I would hate to see the statistic on this, but just like how many farms dissed over their crop, right? Or didn't harvest their tree crop, right? Whatever it is, like there's been so much beautifully grown food that has been not ever gone to market, not seen the store shelves. Like that, I think is a travesty and something that I think other startups could look at. Of like, how do you make other paths for maybe this crop that couldn't make it to retail because of market conditions, but there's other paths to harvest this crop. Like there's got to be another opportunity there too.
Yeah, I'm sure the number would like blow your mind because it's like the tail end of our watermelon deal when the pricing got so low it was more expensive to put it in the bin than to harvest it, and so made the decision to leave some of the crop in the field. So yeah, some unharvested there. Like on a lot of our crops, we get multiple picks off one crop. So if we do a first pick of peppers, a month later it's going to set that second set of fruit, and oftentimes there's not a home for that, and so you're leaving it on the plant and disking it under at the end of the season, and it's a huge economic challenge where it's like it's expensive to harvest these products, and if it's kind of this low end market, sometimes it doesn't justify the cost to harvest it to get it out of the field. Like true in other categories as well, like on wine grapes, we've talked about that a bit. That industry is very challenged, and now being kind of like close to winter, seeing leaf drop of how many wine grapes are left on the vine is crazy. Driving around Lodi, like you could just see the bare vines now, and there's just clusters of grapes everywhere that didn't find a home. So yeah, all the water, all the energy, all the effort to produce that just to have it basically wither on the vine is crazy. How much loss and waste is built into the system currently.
One thing I'll mention just in particular on our farm that we do to mitigate these challenges and market pricing and everything is just being diversified. So I think that's something that we've leaned into a lot is, Tim, I don't know, how many crops did we grow this year? Was it over 10?
Over 10. Yeah, that's definitely like one of the positives is diversification of not having all the eggs in one basket and continually being kind of aggressive on finding like new partners, new buyer opportunities to have multiple homes for multiple products, to be in a situation where if we are short on one crop, we can divert to another buyer, and just kind of being continually aggressive there, not complacent that like just because we've always sold it here, it's always going to go there. We got to like keep eyes wide open on opportunities.
Tim, I want to take this a little different direction now. Let's talk about ag tech. This is, belt tightening season, right? Where growers are just less interested in investing in ag tech because margins are lower. Everyone's just really trying to survive. If you, looking into where we're at and where we're going, if you had let's call it a few $200,000 of an ag tech budget, like where are you spending that today? Like if you had some money to deploy, what's top of mind for optimizing the farm for you?
I mean, the thing that I'm like most excited about is these weed control solutions like Verdant Robotics, Eco Robotics, the more in the See and Spray weeding technologies. Like those are starting to mature a little bit to where they're, I think, ready for on-farm adoption. So probably would be kind of making an investment in one of those, putting a down payment and financing a portion of that. Just really like one of our biggest line item expenses is hand weeding on the farm, where we're bringing in crews for peppers and watermelons, sometimes in tomatoes. So we're running hand crews through a lot of different fields. And if we can eliminate that, I think there's, more clear ROI on those now. I think the challenge historically has been like our utilization for these kinds of machines is 3-4 months tops versus, historical use cases for some of this has been with, Taylor Farms or Grimway or like these big producers that have multiple production zones that can basically ROI this on a year-round basis where they can have the machine in field for majority of the year, moving out to the different projection zones. So like that was kind of a big barrier for us of just like the ROI when you're only using it for a couple months is a little bit more challenging. But like I said, they're starting to commercialize more, price points have come down. So that would be something that I would probably pull the trigger on in the next season or so that I think would drive significant impact to the farm.
What about like, I'm coming at you with these questions that I did not prep you for, but like zoom out, like think as like audacious as possible. Like, is there any like idea, like what would move the needle so fundamentally for the farm?
It's like funny, like debriefing, like having these postmortems on the farm. Like the biggest thing is like the supply and demand dynamics that are like like a lot of majority of ag tech isn't really like addressing those two needles. So it was like, oh, we didn't have a good year because we didn't have a great like AI farmer app or something like that. Like that wasn't the issue. It was these other macro factors. But I could look at like what our top line expenses. Like that's why there's been so much investment in robotic weeding is because it's a huge line item for us. And so I think that's kind of where my head initially goes. It wasn't a lack of software or something like that led to just a challenging farm economy.
Tim, something else that we did this year that I think was new, that is a growth opportunity for us as a business, is changing a little bit of our format. So typically we're harvesting into big bins, selling to processors, but this year we piloted a new program doing field pack into smaller boxes and at a higher price point. So it's a higher revenue potential for us, but obviously requires a little bit of change to the operation. So maybe unpack that a little bit, because that is a big lever for us as a business, and it's not necessarily ag tech.
Totally. Yeah, we've been thinking about this for a while. We did our like squash box, fruit stand boxes a couple of years ago of like the idea of like, could we produce case level formats at the farm? And so this year actually got a true kind of like MVP type trial going, field packing peppers into 10 and 25 pound boxes, which is kind of a new muscle for us to flex on the farm. Like historically, like you said, everything is going into bulk basket trailers or into bins. And so field pack requires, much more management on the food safety side, on the production side, the equipment needs. So it's a big investment, but the trade-off is that you're getting a premium anytime you can move away from selling into bulk or selling wholesale to selling more in a consumer format or a retail format. The pricing and the economics are better. So you're adding costs in that because you're buying packaging and straps and all the stuff that go along with it. So especially like our operation is complex. And so like, how do we kind of like insert some of these programs, but not like take up too much time and like distract from like everything else that we have going on? So like, how can we find kind of complementary and synergistic programs that could be more field pack type stuff with everything else we have going on? So we're going to continue to build on this next year, Ty. I think it's a big opportunity. One of the things we talk about too is like we've, find this really cool high value opportunity, but it's like a third of an acre. It's like a very small field. And like in the context of our operation, is that worth our time? So we're constantly having to kind of make those, have those conversations on like, yes, it's a premium. Is it worth the effort given like the amount of land it's consuming and time it's consuming?
Tim, we need to wrap things up here. I want to get your quick views on two topics. One is regenerative ag. We discussed a little bit last week, but just general thoughts there of kind of our thoughts on regenerative management. And then two, direct to consumer. We talked a little bit more about more consumer formats, but just like, what's your perspective on direct to consumer and the opportunity for there? Is that something we're gonna focus on?
Yeah, on the regen side, continuing to iterate and like build on what we've talked about the past couple of years, what we're doing on the farm. So strategic cover cropping, where if we can get a field off early, get a cover crop in the ground leading up to the following planting. I think soil amendments make a lot of sense too. Again, like situational for us of like I said, our season ran up until November. Days are getting shorter. We're having to quickly prep fields for planting garlic and our winter wheat. And so like just there's not enough hours in the day given that short sprint from completing harvest to starting planting for the upcoming winter crops on where we can kind of place a cover crop seed or look at off-season soil amendments. On the biofertilizer or biofertility front, continuing to look at different biostimulants. We had biostimulants incorporated in almost all of our crop plans this year. So it's been cool to kind of augment biologicals into the program. Like I think we've talked about, like, I don't think that synthetic chemicals are going away anytime soon. I think it's going to be, like, how can you have a management plan that is increasing biologicals and having synthetics as well, and in a balance together, not a one or all proposition. And then on kind of the peripheral stuff, we have our riparian wildlife habitats, our hedgerows. So those have been, like, you're not seeing like a clear cut like ROI off those. They're like very beautiful to look at. They're attracting native pollinators, but it's not a clear cut ROI back to the field or farm on some of those other practices. It still feels like quite early, of like no one's quite solved regenerative for every single crop type in every single region. It's like, it's very specific what regenerative garlic looks like in our region versus what it looks like in Bakersfield versus what it looks like in other production zones. So I think there's remains like a lot of momentum and positivity around this. Like we obviously talked about the USDA NRCS announcement funding $700 million to continue to accelerate that. So still optimistic about it. We haven't seen, material impact, like material changes in terms of like, oh, buyers want regenerative product. They want to tell the story. Like there hasn't been any pull from that side of the market, but still, trying to figure out what works on our farm to see if we can drive expenses out of the operation and see if there's increased interest in the future on the demand side.
Tim, you just seem super reasonable about all this. Like super reasonable about regen, about ag tech. Like you're just a reasonable guy.
Super reasonable guy, yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode unpacking the farm season, man. I love the farm. I love what we're doing with Nuss Farms. I hope, Tim, this conversation actually took you out of Grinch mode, put you back in farmer mode where you belong for 2026.
I'm back. We got the garlic in the ground. We've got 2 weeks here. We got like our team is taking the next 2 weeks off. So we're going to be a little heads down on the farm. So it's going to be a nice little break, and I'll be back in farmer mode early Jan, Ty. Don't worry.
All right, guys, be on the lookout for the Acre Awards coming out next week. And we appreciate you guys listening.